Being a Christian sometimes isn't the easiest thing in the world. Being a Christian sometimes is something we don't really want to do. Sometimes being a Christian is very uncomfortable. Let's paint a picture of what Jesus' life was like during the time that he was actually walking with his disciples on earth. He's walking with them right by Samaria. This is Samaria. It's now I think the Gaza Strip now. There's Galilee there and Jerusalem. And the time of Jesus, when Jesus was walking around, see if you can notice any similarities. In the time of Jesus, about 8% of the population were the rich. And they owned just about 80% of everything that was around. The people that Jesus is talking to, most of them, are poor. They are food insecure. They are living in a town that is not their property. They are kind of immigrants without a home. Most of the community is illiterate. Most people work with their hands. A good percentage of children will never grow to adulthood because of health. It was a weird time. A lot of people drank wine in those days. And we always think, wow, to be in the first century would be just great. The reason they drank wine is because most of their water contained so much bacteria and pollutants that it made everyone sick. And so they would ferment the grape juice because it was the healthier thing for them to drink. I'm told that they didn't have it as fermented as what we have it as fermented, but there's different arguments on that. People were paranoid. People were scared. People were always worried that something was coming. And for most of them, the thing that they thought was coming was actually the end of the world. And they also had barriers. Barriers that separated races, that separated cultures. This is Samaria. This also separated religious beliefs. You see, the Samaritans, we often hear the Good Samaritan story. The Samaritans, they believed that Moses was the only prophet there was. And that all of the laws that they followed were from what they called the original Torah. You see, there was a time in little history here. There was a time that religious experts were held up in Babylonia, and they wrote a lot of what we call the Old Testament now. The Samaritans did not believe that any of that was real. They thought it was actually polluted and tainted, and what they thought was that they had the true religion. Moses was their prophet, and they followed what Moses did. They even they believed that where Moses was in a different place than what the Hebrews was. Today, we call those almost different denominations. You know, we have difference of opinion in certain things. You know, we're right, the Lutherans are wrong, you know, that kind of thing. But, any Lutherans out here? Okay, this is just a joke. But we are able to combine, especially in neighbors, we are able to combine people with several different denominational histories. We've got Catholics here. I know we have some Lutherans here. We have some Presbyterians here. We have a lot of people that come here. In those days, don't even think about that. If you were a Hebrew, you did not want to get caught in Samaria, because anybody that had the difference of opinion was wrong, and so much so that they were so close to the religion that they hated them even more than anybody else. There was more of a despising to Samaria than there was to pagans. Samaritans were thought of as pagans, which was us at the time. If you were not Hebrew, if you don't have Hebrew blood, you were a Gentile, you were a pagan. You worshiped other weird things while the Hebrews had the true faith. And the important thing for the Hebrews was to preserve the race. Keep it going. Do not intermingle with anybody of a different culture, of a different religion, and especially not a different race. Don't do that. If you were in Judea and you had to travel to Galilee, if you could, you went around. You didn't even go in it. That's how despised this place was. That's how dirty this place was. If you had to go through it, say you had a dentist appointment, you had to make that appointment, because you know those are hard to reschedule. So you had to, by the time that you reached the end, you had to do this. You had to take off your sandals in front of people as you left the town and shake the dust off, proclaiming, I'm not even taking a part of the ground from this despicable place. A little bit of prejudiceness, a little bit of bigotry. If the Hebrews had their way at this time, they would build a wall around Samaria, keeping them in and also keeping them out. Because they were scared. It's easy for us to say, oh, you bigots, you nasty, nasty people. But they were scared. They were fearful that if their blood intermingled or if somehow it got molded in, there would be a change of ideas and people might be influenced by different things, then all of this stuff would congeal and then they would lose the purity of who they were. Sound familiar? I don't know about you guys, but I think I see a couple of similarities here. There are people in our world today that do not want to intermingle with other people, whether it be race, whether it be income levels, whether it be religion. We can put any religion in here if we want. You know, we can put Muslims in here. You see, in Christian world, if I'm a pastor, if I mention being a Muslim or Muslim, I'm supposed to burst into flames, just so you know. But as Muslims, we share a similar history. You know? The Old Testament, many books in the Old Testament are shared by us, Jewish people and Muslims. But we don't want them living next door, do we? Because if they live next door, if they built a mosque or a temple or anything right there, it'd be an affront. It would be a challenge. It would be terroristic. And there were terrorists in this time. There were terrorists. They called them zealots. Terrorists on all sides. People in the first century feared terrorist attacks just like we do today. They feared violent acts just like we do today. They feared losing their identity just like we do today. If only we could keep them separated. But then this guy, Jesus, comes into town. Everyone was thrilled because this guy could heal people. He could do something. You got a canker sore? He would take that out with just a blink of an eye. But boom, you're done. It was great. To be seen with Jesus was the ultimate selfie. Hey, look at us on the water. Because he could walk on. Okay. But then he would do stuff that really made it uncomfortable. He would pull out these things of talking about how some of the religious leaders that the people were following at that time were crooked and that they were hypocrites. And he would actually call them hypocrites. That made people really uncomfortable. Not only the religious leaders, but the people following the religious leaders. Because just like the first century, just like we are today, we like to be comfortable. We don't like when people rock the boat, and very few of us like anything controversial. We say we do if we're on the controversial side. But we really don't like conflict, do we? Neither did they. And Jesus was bringing conflict. He would do these things where he would welcome somebody into a synagogue that wasn't supposed to be there. A pagan, a Gentile, somebody that was injured. He wasn't following the rules of this. And he was getting a little, this whole separation here of other people and other people was starting to blur a little bit. And it was making people a little bit uncomfortable. He's walking right around the border there. You know, they had to walk around this, don't touch the Samaritan soil, I don't have enough sandals, and they would walk. And oftentimes, if you were unclean, as they would call it, you were not allowed into some communities. By the Old Testament standards, if you had a ailment, you had to stay on the outside and hope that somebody would heal you. And believe it or not, in Jesus' time, there were people that did healings, not just Jesus. And so they would stay on the outskirts, and when people would come in, they would ask to be healed. And if they got healed, what they could do is they could go, this is the rule, they had to go and show the religious leader that they were healed. And the religious leader would say, all right, you can come in. And then they would try to get back into society. Try, because they're starting in extreme poverty now. There's 10 people here. And the Bible says that they have leprosy. Leprosy is a, definition-wise, it is different. I mean, it is the thing that we think of today where the skin's like peeling off, or it can be just, Carl, you got to get that thing looked at, and just a thing on the, which you don't want to have anyone say that, hey, what's wrong with your thumb? Because next thing you know, you're kicked out of town and you got, but it's just a pimple, I got a pimple and now I'm not allowed into society. But there was 10 of these guys that had some sort of skin ailment. And they see Jesus walking by with his disciples. Jesus sees them, and they say a word that's not used very much in the New Testament, not used by people other than the disciples. They say, Master. Master, can you heal us? This is where it would be really neat if Jesus just went, ba-boom, and just kept walking. And not only were they healed, but each one of them had a $10 bill in their pocket, just to start a new life, All Jesus says to them is go to the religious leaders, show yourselves to them. And on the way, they realize that they are healed of everything. 9 of them continue to just go into the town. One of them turns back. And he puts himself, they say he goes face down. I won't do it because I can't get back up. But he goes face down in front of Jesus, thanking him. And this is where I want to add a little dramatic license, because it never shows what the emotion of Jesus is. We always think that when Jesus is, some of the things that he says, that he's like mad at us. I don't know why we always think that the Savior, the person that came to save us, is just always mad at us. This is where I think he smiles. And he says, isn't it funny? Out of 10 people that I healed, the only one to come and say thank you was a foreigner. Don't do that, Jesus. That makes us uncomfortable. That's like today saying the one that showed appreciation was the Muslim, was the Jewish person, was the Lutheran, was the Catholic. What can we learn from that today? What can we learn from the fact that this is not the first time that Jesus made a point to point out somebody from a different culture, a different race, a different world, and give them a position of somebody that we can learn from? What can we learn from this today? In some cases in our world, it's gotten so bad that we don't even need a place. We don't even need a country to hate. We just don't trust the neighbor that we haven't met yet. I'm one of these weirdos that wherever I go in town, and this is true, I say hi to people. And if I'm in the store or if I'm walking, I say hi to people. Some people, will return it. And some people will almost look at me more angry than they were looking before I said it. Like, how dare you? You don't know me. This is where our society has kind of gotten a little bit. But guess what? It was the same society in the first century. People weren't saying hi to each other there either because they were scared. How long have you been married? Yeah. 19, is that true? Oh, nice. Good job. That's really good. That's wonderful, 19 years. How long did you guys know each other before you were? 2 years. 2 years? And before that, were you strangers? Mm-hmm. Every single person in this room was a stranger at one time to somebody. There was a time that I did not know what an Allison was. That came out bad. But there was a time when we were strangers. As a matter of fact, there was a time when all of us were strangers. Every single one of us. There was a time I didn't know any of you. Kind of liked it. When I look around some of you, but for most of you, it's nice. We sit here in a group today as a church family. But at one time, we did not know each other. At one time, we could have been the people that walked in the grocery store and looked down rather than looked at each other. That's the point that Jesus was making 2,000 years ago in a similar time, in a similar place. To say, oh, it was in Jesus' time is a nonsensical answer to that because they had the same feelings as we do today. They had the same fear today, and Jesus is saying the same thing today. Love the foreigner. Love the stranger. Welcome them. Make friends.